Another Dutch Navy story, this time from the time after I returned from Curaçao and when I got stationed on the naval base in Den Helder in the Netherlands. When I was stationed as a driver in Den Helder, we had a big garage with all our company vehicles parked in there. There were trucks, touring cars, small buses, luxury cars, pretty ordinary cars, but they were called Lux Autos, and a few forklifts. Those vehicles were driven by ourselves, obviously, but the luxury cars would also be assigned to Navy personnel for business trips to other locations. They would pick up the vehicle with the appropriate paperwork, allowing them to legally drive the company vehicle. This particular petty revenge was a joint effort between my chief, a few co-workers, and myself. This one particular sergeant major would pick up a car and leave his private car inside the garage, which was very much prohibited, insurance and Navy regulations, and he would always return after working hours. My chief would tell him to cease parking his own vehicle in the garage and to start parking it in the assigned parking lot outside of the garage. The sergeant major would say yes, but do no, thinking him outranking our chief, a sergeant, would protect him from repercussions. So after a few times my chief was fed up with this behavior, but wanted retaliation outside of the official ways. So he came up with a plan. This was actually to protect him from military disciplinary law, so to make sure the sergeant major didn't actually get in trouble. The next time the sergeant major parked his car in the garage, he appointed me and a co-worker to take a forklift and to put a pallet with concrete blocks behind his car, as close as possible without scratching it. There was really no way he could exit the garage now. I happened to be driver of the watch that specific afternoon, and my chief was very clear to me. Do not remove the pallet. Yes, Sergeant. Understood. So when he returned to us with the company car, he parked it and walked to the office. He gave me the paperwork and the car keys, and it was obvious he didn't notice that his own car was boxed in. So he walked away and returned moments later to ask about the pallet with the concrete blocks. I told him I could not pick them up because I wasn't allowed to drive the forklift. So he ordered me, a sailor first class, to remove the pallet. I declined, telling him he outranks me, but in my current function I happened to outrank him. Then he asked me for the keys of the company car back, so he could drive home at least. Again, I declined and told him he would be in legal offense, because him taking the car without the proper paperwork stating he could take the car to his home address would be considered military joyriding. Then he went outside and made a few phone calls until he got picked up by a family member. To be clear, our transportation office was outside the military base. We had to cross 2 bridges to get onto the base itself. So, while it is part of the base, there is no actual security at our gate, and officially you are not on the base itself when you enter our office. The next day I made sure my chief was informed of all that happened, and after a few chuckles, the wait for the sergeant major began. When he finally entered the building, he was pretty much passed off and began to berate my chief. My chief, however, had informed his chief, a captain a few desks further. So when the captain told the sergeant major to stop whining and to consider himself lucky that there was no official reprimand, but only a very clear warning, he backed off and apologized for parking the car inside the garage. Next was the moment that my chief called me over and told me to take the forklift and to take the pallet away. In silence, we walked to his car. I took the forklift and released the poor car from his captivity. The sergeant major dutifully parked his private car in the assigned parking place ever since.